As I mentioned before, Pastor Don has been under the weather and under the knife. And this is Pastor Don's week to speak. And so first I want to say is thank you to Pastor Don and his wife, as he can choose anybody he would like to speak today, and he chose me, and I find that a huge privilege. So you can take my thanks back to him, Sister Becky. As, I don't know, I consider that a huge honor. And I consider the pulpit a big deal, and so when someone consciously gives it up, then I thank him, and I thank you for letting me be back with you one more week. Today, we're going to finish up the book of Mark. So in Mark chapter 6, if you happen to have a Bible, you can go ahead and go that way. If you don't have a Bible, there will be some around there in front of you. Mark chapter 6. And I feel a little strange speaking today because after Joe was done, I just want to go home. After we've lifted up God and praised Him in a life, what more can I say to that? What's interesting is we really are tagging into it, and we're talking about storms today. If you could get me up on the screen, that would be great, though. Thanks, Brian. There we are. Getting through your particular storm. You know, as we look at storms, I can't help but think about real, physical, actual storms. As a child, I grew up in the Midwest. Most of you grew up either around here or in another country, one of the two. Most of you not in the Midwest. So when I came out here, what everyone said to be worried about is fires, mudslides, and earthquakes. Three things I'd never seen before. Because growing up, the big problem we had was tornadoes, floods, and blizzards. Three things you don't see a lot of right here. As a child, I remember that when it was tornado season, I grew up in a little town called Kenton, Ohio, and it wasn't real high off the ground. If you know anything about tornadoes, that's a bad thing. You want to be either very high or very low. And we were kind of in a plane, and as a child, when a tornado would happen, we'd get on the little television or the radio and see kind of where it was. When it looked like it was close, what you're supposed to do is go to the basement. Most of you from California don't know what a basement is. Here's what a basement is. You dig a hole under the house, and it's like an extra room down there. Your house sits on it. And that's what you're supposed to do. But my parents were a little different. When they thought a tornado was close enough, we'd all go sit on the porch so we could watch it roll down the street. Yeah. Because my parents' theory was if it's going to hit the house, it's going to hit the house. So once you see it and you think it's coming at you, then we'll run to the basement. Otherwise, I'm not wasting my night in the basement. So we'd have hot cocoa, and the wind would be going, and the leaves, and the hail, and all the great stuff that happens with a tornado. My dad tells a story, I don't remember it, that we were doing that one night. And as we're sitting out there, my mom said, you know what we really need is some popcorn. And so Dad goes, fine, I'll make some popcorn. He goes to the cupboard, and we're out of popcorn. So he puts me in the car, and we go to get popcorn. Literally driving down the street. We're driving down. You know, there's one place that's open 24 hours a day. It was a small town. We're driving across town, and we look down the street, and there's a tornado in the street we're driving on. Like I said, I don't remember. I was fairly young. My dad claims he just put the car in park in the middle of the street. If it's going to hit us, it's going to hit us. We can't outrun a tornado if you've ever tried. It's not going to happen very often. And so he claims the tornado came down the street between the hospital and this neighborhood, jumped our car, and kept going. He claims he looked up and saw a tornado. Now, I don't know. Next time you see him, you can ask him. It was a Volkswagen Bug, so if it would have hit us, we would have known. You see, in today's story, the end of Mark, we're going to talk about a real storm, a physical storm, and a storm that happens in your life, a spiritual storm. I think. The little light comes on here, Brian. Nothing at all. Okay, cool. You see, the disciples had just fed 5,000 people. Think back 2 weeks. Just prior to feeding 5,000 people, they had been kicked out of cities, right, for preaching His name. They'd healed, they'd cast out demons, and Christ had been rejected. in his own hometown. All those things that happened just prior to the story today, Mark chapter 6. And in Mark chapter 6, there's a very famous storm, one that happens while the disciples are out on a boat. As we think about that, I'm wondering what kind of storms are raging in this room today. Maybe your house is having a storm of financial proportions. Maybe it's a relational storm. Maybe it's a spiritual storm. Perhaps you're dealing with some doubt. Maybe your storm is your occupation. Maybe something's not going as well at work as you had hoped. You see, storms can be physical or they can be spiritual. Sometimes they're both. In this case, they're both. We're going to read the first couple verses, Mark chapter 6, verse 45 and 46. Let me find it. Here we are. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went on a mountainside to pray. So, immediately after this successful work, it says he forced them to get into a boat. Let me read from a couple different versions. The NIV says made them. The New Living says insisted they get in the boat. And the New American Standard says constrained his disciples, which is probably the strongest of all those words. You see, a couple things were happening. A couple things you have to read into the text a little. One is these were fishermen, right? And fishermen have a tendency to know what the weather is going to be soon. So they look to the mountains, right? And from what I understand reading historically and from this region, right before a storm hits this area, this sea on the northern end, the sky above the mountains turns yellow. It's a pretty easy sign to see. When it begins to turn yellow, that's not a natural color, you know a storm's coming. So more than likely, most theologians think that looking to the distance, they said, tomorrow morning might be a better crossing. The second thing is, John chapter 6 tells us the people were beginning to talk about making Christ king. These people, the 5,000 he fed, were talking about making Christ king. Now, if that's the case, the disciples may very well have thought that's a good idea. They might have been of the same mindset. That, yeah, let's go ahead and make him king. We have a good start. We have 5,000 people that believe in him. 5,000 people that are excited about this idea. Let's go right ahead and make him king. So, turning tail and running was probably not exactly what they had in mind. In fact, this is probably the most strained relationship you are going to see between Christ and the disciples anywhere in the New Testament. The one place where the disciples said, no, this is what we want to do, and Christ says, no, this is what we must now do. Christ puts them in a boat, and he pushes them off, right? I'm going to meet you on the other side. In fact, I'm going to go alone to pray, and I'm going to walk along the north side. We looked at the picture before a couple of weeks ago, if you remember. And they're on the north side of the sea there. So he puts them in the boat, and he says, I am going to follow along. And when you see me, you can come and pick me up if you like. If you get all the way to the other side, I'll meet you there. Christ goes to pray. Notice that this strained relationship, this very difficult situation in the life of the disciples happens immediately following major success. Right? They had failure, and then success, and then more success, and it's building, and the people say, let's make him king. And then Christ says, it's time for us to go, and the disciples, I don't want to go. Now, I'm going to force you into the boat. You are going to go. And I'm going to walk away from you right now and go pray, go talk to God. In your life, sometimes when things are going very, very, very well, we have to be conscious that a storm may be brewing somewhere. Possibly when things are at their peak, where finally things look like they're working, maybe there's a storm ready to happen. You see, from the disciples' perspective, everything was going the way they had planned. This was what a Messiah was supposed to look like. He feeds an army because he wants to, not because there's food. Remember, he did a whole bunch of ministry that was outside the realm of possibility. This is what a leader's supposed to be. And immediately Christ says, I'm going to diffuse this. This isn't going to happen today. Notice that at this point, Christ takes a little bit of time by himself, right? He goes to meditate too. He steps away from that situation. Takes time with God alone. I am an aggressive person. I mean, that may shock most of you. When put in any kind of a confrontational standpoint, I have a tendency to confront right back. That's my personality. I don't run away from confrontation. I have a tendency to run to it, perhaps. And because of that, this idea that Christ is getting ready for a turning point for the disciples, a point where they must understand what's happening right now, and they don't. From a human perspective, from a Chris perspective, I want to just hit them over the head and start screaming at them. How can you not see this? Yet Christ realizes that even though he is 100% God and 100% man, he must get away and meditate. And he does. How often in your life should you get away and meditate? And perhaps you choose not to. You choose to jump right in and argue and fight. How many times is it maybe embarrassing to say, I need a minute away. I need to not see you right now. Yet, perhaps it's what we need. Now, I think it's important to look at this situation from a mathematical standpoint. I got Ben sitting here in the middle, so if I get this wrong, you'll yell at me, Ben. Verse 47 says, when evening came, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was now against them. It was about the fourth watch of the night, and he went out to them, walking on the lake, and he was about to pass by them. But when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. And they cried out because they all saw him, and they were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, take courage, it's I, don't be afraid. Now, they made nearly no progress. If you just read, Mark says they were in the middle of the lake, and it was the fourth watch. We know that the fourth watch happens between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. We also know that they got in the boat when it got dark. So if you take 7 or 8 o'clock, you add the hours necessary to get to 3 a.m., you're looking at between 7 and 9 hours they've been on the boat. 7 and 9 hours rowing across the lake in the storm they knew was coming and they didn't want to get into, and Christ sent them into anyway. Not only were they rowing for 7 to 8 hours, but John, in John chapter 6, tells us the full distance that they were going was 3 miles. 3 miles. So they rowed 1.5 miles in 8 hours. Not only are they exhausted, but there's almost zero visibility. They don't even see Christ coming till he's right on them. There's zero visibility. There's no progress made whatsoever. And then Christ passes by. Now, I did a lot of reading on this particular section because that had always struck me as an interesting bit of phrasing. If you know how the Gospels work, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all tell the same story. Some are duplicates, including the same things. Some add a little bit, take away a little bit. This story is found everywhere, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Everybody finds this important. Mark, and Mark alone, says that Christ was about to pass them. I did some reading because I found that interesting. the other Gospels focus on different things. Mark's focus is that Christ was not only in proximity of them, not only coming towards them, but actually going beyond that, getting ready to pass them by. Now that's important because they've just seen the feeding of the 5,000. They've just seen Christ heal hundreds, cast out demons, raise people from the dead. He said, cross this lake in a storm, and they were scared. Christ was preparing to actually pass by them. A lot of theologians believe that if they had ignored Christ, thinking he was a ghost, and failing to call to him, Christ might actually have passed by completely. Might actually have gone out and found 12 more. Now, I'm not God. I'm not saying that is the case. However, when you look at your life today, can you point back to places where God was moving, and if you had ignored, he might have kept on moving and left you? I got some nods. I know people who feel like God was moving in their life and they were so scared they stayed rooted, and God chose someone else and raised that person up to do that work that God intended. Perhaps this is that position for the 12 in the boat. Perhaps this was the point in which if they didn't figure it out, if they didn't get on board wholeheartedly with Christ's idea, that was it. He was going to choose someone new. Possibly. You see, in the middle of the chaos, not only does Christ come, but he gives real opportunity. You see, the courage that is necessary happens during the storm. In the storm. It doesn't happen after. It doesn't happen right before. It's very easy for me to say, I'm getting ready to go through a rough time, and here's my plan, and I make a list. I can walk through this hard time because I have a list. It's also very easy to say, I just walked through the hardest part of my life, and I'm not scared of that anymore. It's a whole lot harder to have courage in the chaos, in the middle of the storm. You see, at this point in time, Mark tells us the disciples' hearts were hardened. I challenge anyone to find another place where it says the disciples' hearts were hardened. This is it. In fact, most scholars point back to this point and feel that at this point, this is where Judas made his decision to eventually turn on Christ. That Judas never turned back from this point. You get a little more of that feel in John chapter 6 also. You see, they'd already made up their mind that this isn't happening. Not only is this the man who not only fed 5,000, but healed and cast out demons. This is our leader. They want to make him king, and our leader is saying, let's run away. If Pastor Lee were to come back tomorrow and say, while he was on his trip, God has led him, and he thinks what we need to do is sell the church and stop being one, would we consider him a leader anymore? Probably not, right? If the president of the country stood up and said, I want to hand in my resignation, or else we're going to sell our entire country to Canada, would we consider him the president of the United States anymore? Probably not. That's how the disciples are feeling. They put him in a position where he can become king, be the thing the entire Old Testament talked about from their perspective. And he's saying, let's go away from it. You see, the courage actually comes in the storm because as they see him coming, they realize that this is not normal. In fact, they think it's a ghost, and the word ghost here is the same word we actually get Holy Ghost from, and that concept does not mean the Holy Spirit. Not in this context. You read it, you do your search, it literally means a spirit, like we're coming up to Halloween, so we know what we're talking about. It really means a ghost, a dead person who's come back to frighten others. So they literally look across the sea, and the waves are going, and the wind is blowing, and at the very last second, they see someone walking on the water, and the first thing in their mind is this is someone who is back from the dead to harm us. And so they scream out in fear. But Christ says, have courage. It's me. I'm right here. I'm walking on this storm. When you're in the middle of a storm in your life, it becomes difficult to see where Christ is in that storm. If I were to put everyone in a big vehicle and drive us all out to the wildfires right now, I think they're getting to be gone. We're going to have to search a little bit. If we were to find them and I would get you right on the edge and we were all to sit and brainstorm, how would we deal with this fire? I think it'd be much more overwhelming than we watch on television. It looks very easy. You fly over and you drop water right there and it goes away. Yet they're talking about 70-foot flames. Confronted with that, where to start, where to see the answer. This is what the disciples are dealing with, physically, emotionally, and morally speaking. Their hearts were hardened. Their world is a storm right now. Now, these are hardened fishermen. I've heard people preach that perhaps that they were in fear of their life. I don't know if they were in fear of their life. The passage doesn't say that, but it does say that they have been on duty for 8 hours in a rowboat and haven't gotten anywhere. So they're exhausted, and they finally cry out to Christ. Verse 51 says this. Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed. And here's why they're amazed. They had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. It's interesting because they realize, yes, this must be Christ. And they say, get in the boat. My boat's going to flip over. I'm exhausted. Look at me. I'm all swole up. I got no strength left. How long can I row this boat? I'm never going to get there. Please get in the boat. He takes 1 foot into the boat, and the wind dies down. And at that point, they were amazed. I have to be careful not to shake my head and get upset with the disciples at this point. Because 2 weeks ago we talked, they took a handful of fish and a handful of bread, they broke it up and fed 5,000 hungry men. They, in groups of 2, went door to door and they put hands on sick and they were healed. They preached in His name. Christ Himself raised people from the dead just prior to this. Christ steps in a boat after walking on water, and the wind dies, and they're amazed. You see, wonders had already happened to them. Already. The amazing things, the miracles had already been happening, yet they were hardened to them. I can test that if you're going through a storm in your life right now, God is already doing miracles. In fact, they've already happened in your life. You may be having trouble seeing them because until Christ got in the boat, they didn't grasp the significance of what they'd just seen. Because they've been hardened. They've been hardened because they had a goal. Their goal was a secular dominance, right? They wanted to take over Roman society. They wanted to be it. They wanted to be the right hand and the left hand of the new king. They wanted to be Secretary of State. They wanted a new Mercedes. They did. They wanted the house by the ocean. Malibu just burnt down. They'd be cheap right now. You see, they misunderstood the truth. They witnessed truth already, but because their hearts were hardened, they missed it. In a lot of ways, this is kind of their last chance. Either you get it now, or it's over. So Christ is in the boat. Other passages talk about other people walking on the water. But that's another message for another time. What Mark does say, actually John refers to it specifically, I think it fits great in Mark, is that once he stepped in the boat, not only did the wind die, but they were like 3 rows from being at the shore. And they're on the shore. Before he stepped there, they were halfway. It's miracle after miracle after miracle, and all because they had the courage to say, go ahead and get in the boat. My life is insane right now. There's a storm everywhere. I can't get to where I'm going, yet I'm going to have courage right now and say, yes, Christ, I don't get it, but I still want you in the boat with me. And so they gave up this concept of a secular kingdom. And then a calm comes after the storm, as with our lives. Verse 53 says, when they crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret, and they anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Christ. They ran through that whole region, and they carried the sick on their mats wherever they heard he was, and wherever he went, into the villages or towns or countryside. They placed the sick in the marketplace. They begged him to let them even touch the edge of his cloak, and all who were touched were healed. All who were touched were healed. You see, after the miracle, actually a series of miracles, Christ is not only seen, but he's recognized. He's seen and he's recognized. The boat has finally landed, and they've gotten out. Christ is seen and he's recognized. Let me say, for those of you who are young believers, we had a testimony of one today that's fairly new in the faith, and we'll have another one up here in a moment. You see, those who are new in the faith, they've been touched, right? They've seen Christ. They know the healing. They know the miracle. They see the change in their lives. Because they've seen it once, not only do we love to hear the story, but we expect them to see it again, right? We expect them to continue to see Christ, because now they can actually recognize him. Now that faith has happened in whole for the disciples, and they've given up this concept that perhaps, I shouldn't say given up, they bring it up one other time, that perhaps this is a physical kingdom that Christ has been talking about. Once that's been given up, then Christ can be seen and recognized for who he is. You see, if Brother Lopez, who spoke earlier, had never recognized, yes, this is God and it's not me, if he'd continued to claim, my life is changing because of me, God will pull that blessing away. The disciples finally grasped this at some level. John chapter 6 adds one other really interesting fact for those of you who are trying to take notes. By the way, I realized that there is no note sheet, and you can blame me. I didn't realize I was doing this until a little bit later, and I had a couple things to do this week, so I apologize to you. John chapter 6 also says that people who were there for the 5,000, this is a great little side story. 5,000 people gathered, and they get fed, and the sun starts to go down. Christ takes the disciples, he puts them on the boat, he goes away to pray. The 5,000, the sun comes up, and they go, where is he? Nobody told them they were leaving. I think that's hysterical. Anyway, and so Christ snuck away. And the 5,000 go, what in the world? Oh, there's one boat gone. They must have left. So they all get in their boats, and they all hire more boats to go find him. So a lot of people believe that this group that was there when he landed were some of the same people that were chasing him down. You see, at this point, because he's been recognized, real healing begins to take place. There was an immense popularity of Christ during that period. The disciples, after this, begin to account the stories. And the full accounting comes out to 80 or 90 some stories of healings. We realize that they only captured a fraction of what actually happened, as is true with the entire New Testament. So most people believe that the amount of people healed would have been in the thousands after this piece of ministry. You see, that moment on the lake, all 4 Gospels see it as the crux of it. The point in which Christ's ministry turned. And it all happened in one of the scariest stories in the Bible. One of the scariest times for the disciples, one of the scariest times for the 5,000, one of the scariest times for everybody involved. That's when Christ chose to change from kind of raising up leaders to going out and doing ministry. So, in conclusion, as we look at our own life, My conclusion's not there? Love you, Brian. All right. I have it here. In conclusion, do you see a storm coming for you? Are you in that place where things are going pretty well, yet, there's some rumblings at home? Maybe you have a child who is in school and he's doing really well, but the last couple terms, the grades have been slipping a little. And you're wondering if maybe this is a sign that it's not going to work. It's all right. Maybe that's a sign that things are kind of going south for that child, and you begin to worry. Perhaps there's a storm coming in your life in terms of his educational goals. Perhaps you see a storm at your work. Maybe you got a new manager and that particular person doesn't like you very much. And maybe it's okay right now, but eventually it could be bad. Maybe you're just in some sort of transition relationally, and you're scared of where things might go. Perhaps you're already in your storm. Maybe you're dealing with something specifically right now. And as I'm speaking, you can't hear anything else because all you can do is worry about whatever that situation is. Maybe you're in the midst right now, and what you really need is to see Christ before he passes by. You have to see him in the situation because for the life of you, you have no idea what God might want to do in your particular circumstance. How can God possibly use the hard part of your life right now to do good? Maybe you're in a place where you're at the point where you're the one who needs to call out to him today. You look out and there's stuff happening. The chess pieces of your life have moved around. And you have no other choice but to be where the disciples are, where they have no other options but to call out to the scariest thing they see, which is this ghost walking by. They call out, I hope this is God. Or maybe you're in a place where it's time for you to experience the healing that comes after the storm. Have you walked through the storm of your life? Are you to the point where what you really want is to now see God move and heal and begin to change life? What about you? But I like to be in this last spot all the time. I don't like the part where I'm in the boat and the waves are happening and the wind is blowing and I'm wet and I'm tired. And it's the fourth watch of my night and my son is up another time. And I don't think he's sick. I don't think he's really having nightmares. He just doesn't want to go to bed and I'm angry and I'm upset and I just want to sleep. I don't like that part of life. This is the part I like. Have you experienced the healing God has promised after it's all said and done? If you've not experienced that healing, perhaps you haven't asked for that healing. Perhaps your storm isn't quite over. God promises once you call out to him, he's there with you. I love the fact that this entire time Christ could have ended the storm. He could have ended the storm without standing in the boat. Yet he chose to let the disciples fight the storm for 7 hours. Fishermen that are embarrassed because they can't get to where they're trying to go. 7 hours. For you in your life, maybe you feel like it's been too long. God, when's my storm over? If you find yourself in that situation, or perhaps the point where you see a storm coming and you don't want to enter in, but you know Christ is asking you to go to this hard place, or if you're ready for healing, we would love to have a chance to pray with you and ask Christ to be with you specifically this week. To be in your life this week wholehearted, to step into the boat of your life today to begin to calm the storm. If you don't know why you're going through it, maybe your heart's even hard. And you want God to come in and soften you once again so you don't get passed by. As the worship team comes, we'd ask you to come forward. We'd love to pray with you. And after that's all said and done, we're going to celebrate as a church together as we have new life to share with you in our body. Lord God, thank you and praise you. I thank you for the fact that you deem us worthy to go through storms from time to time. And I also thank you for the fact that those end. They're there for a purpose. Then they end, and you come in, and you heal, and you restore, and you build up, and your blessing is through the whole thing. For that, God, we thank you and praise you. Lord, I pray if there's anyone in the room tonight that needs a special touch from you, that you will give it, that you will grant it. We know when 2 or 3 are gathered, you're here, and so we thank you for your presence. In your precious and holy name we pray. Amen. If you please stand with us, that would be great. Amen. If you could be seated for just a moment. We have 4 people who are up, or candidating, I guess, for membership. And we'll ask them to come forward. We have Miss Pam Chin. This is Miss Pam right here. We also have Jim and Juanita Ledbetter. You know, I think I said lead bottom to someone earlier this week. I apologize for that. And Tan Zhang. Tan Zhang. Is it Tan or Tan? Tan. Okay, I was right. Okay. I thought so. Anyway, so it's Ledbetter. Very nice. This is the Ledbetters. This is Jim and Juanita. Hello, Jim. Hello, sir. Good to see you. This is Juanita. This is what I love best about them. Not only do they come to us with a great record of church service and are going to be amazing members and going to dive right in, but we have a good Santa Claus, which is beautiful. I'm very excited about that. Very excited. This is Tan. Good to have you, Miss Tan. How are you? Good. Tan is fairly new to us, just kind of joining, coming in through Pastor Mary's group, which has been beautiful, and so we thank her. She's also going to be very involved in our singles group, which I'm excited about. And this is Miss Pam. Good morning, Miss Pam. How are you? Pam also comes with your membership transfer, correct? New member. New member. Okay, I'm sorry. And they were, by the way, this is my first inquiry class, so I'm very excited. These are mine. Anyway, so that's really cool. And so because of that, I made a great pitch to everybody's department, so they will get involved right away. Now, what we need to do congregationally is, if everyone is happy with these 4, just say yes. Yes. Anybody opposed? There's none of you. Very good. Pastor James is going to lead the 4 of them out the middle doors where they'll be receiving name tags and their packets, and you'll have a chance to shake their hands